Thanks so much for joining us here tonight, Truth Brigade, on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. We have an awesome show in store for you with Shaman Avalon Sakti tonight. We're going to be talking about sacred plants and higher consciousness. How are you doing tonight, Annie?
Great. I'm in great spirit.
Excellent. All righty. Well, big topic tonight. Of course, this is one of your specialty as a shaman. You work with sacred plants and such all the time. You have an extensive knowledge about this. But let me ask you this. There's been a few pieces of news recently, speaking of sacred plants, and Miley Cyrus, I think her stage name or something is Hannah Montana. Forgive me, I don't keep up with that stuff. But they recently put out an article claiming that she was smoking Salvia Divinorum, on video. And, you know, it just makes me wonder, why would they put this out there? Because anyone who knows anything about Salvia knows, number one, it is not a party drug, and if you do choose to partake, you certainly aren't going to be screaming and playing and drinking with your friends, and it just, I don't know. I don't know if you're familiar with the article and those videos, but what do you think of that?
Well, I'm neither familiar with the celebrity nor with the article, but I am familiar with Salvia Divinorum. And it is one of the teacher plants. I personally find it's a very quiet and meditative plant, and in ceremonies that I have taken part in, I found that nobody ever screamed or freaked out. People were sitting quietly, and actually the most common complaint was that nothing was happening.
Yeah, because were they drinking alcohol and just like a typical party scenario? Okay, I didn't think so.
They had to fast. They had to fast a few hours before the ceremony, and it was done in silence after a blessing of the pipes. And then we all sat very quietly together and meditated.
Yeah, I don't know why, but are they trying to make it look like a party drug or something to maybe divert people from using it? Or, I mean, I don't know. Here in the U.S., it's illegal, I believe, in 15 states right now. But, I mean, obviously there's something going on with why they would publicize it. But, I mean, there is no way that they were smoking, or that she was smoking salvia out of a bong too, with her beer.
Actually, this is the topic that I wanted to speak about, but I think we should start it at the beginning, because when you want to know why are they spreading this propaganda, then you have to first understand what the sacred plants are actually doing. And
absolutely.
Then you understand why they suddenly are being banned, and why all this disinfo and scaring people with it. Because there's an agenda and there's a reason. Sacred plants affect our consciousness. They don't affect it in a way that they alter it, but rather you could say there is a unified consciousness that connects all of us, the whole of mankind. And not just mankind, but also the plants and animals on the planet. We are all part of that one great consciousness. And this is our natural state, but we do not normally perceive it because we have too many blocks. These blocks are from living from the left brain, which is what is being enforced in our education system, and from having been told false beliefs since we were very young. A lot of children, for example, have their spirit friends that they're talking to, but the parents then drag them to the psychologist. So basically the reality that we perceive is just like the tip of the iceberg. And the greater part of reality, which is our normal, human heritage. It's what we were made for, to perceive the whole of reality, but we are looking like through a keyhole, and we're seeing a tiny, tiny part of reality only, and then we're basing our conclusions on that. Now, the sacred plants, what they do is, first of all, they remove conditioning. when you take sacred plants in the correct shamanic way, in a sacred way, not in a I want to have a trip way, then they start to remove all your conditioning, religious conditioning, social conditioning, and they tear basically the veils of false perception off your eyes so that you can perceive reality as it really is. For some people, this comes as an utter shock, and some people can't handle it. That's why one has to be prepared emotionally, and one has to also be prepared to let go of anything that isn't truth. If you don't like to see the truth and you're a person who chooses to be in denial, please don't take the sacred plants because you're going to have a terrible time with them.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned preparation or being prepared, but can you tell us what that entails? How does one prepare themselves for an experience like that?
It depends on what plant you are taking. For some plants, the preparation is a lot more serious than for others. Generally, plants that, well, some shamans take poisonous power plants, but let's leave that topic out for now. Let's talk about plants like because that is a can of worms. It can be done. I have done it. And it is very much okay if you know what you're doing, but if you don't, then you might be dead. Mm-hmm. But there are other plants like ayahuasca, for example. That is a plant that needs a very serious preparation because you're going on a very deep journey to the innermost part of yourself, and you're going to have the truths of the universe revealed to you. And if you're not ready, if your mind is very brittle and unflexible, then it might crack a little. It never does any dangerous damage, but it leaves people sometimes shell-shocked if they were not prepared. So the proper preparation is, well, there is a physical preparation that should normally actually be for a whole week with good diet. You have to abstain from a lot of things like salty foods, oily foods, meat. And you should also be abstaining from sex, actually.
Okay, so you mentioned some of the physical preparation, but also I think what's probably even more essential than that is the mental, spiritual, and emotional preparation, and of course your intent.
I mention that all the time because intent is what carries us to our goals, and if we don't have a clear intent, then we are like a ship that's floating at sea.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I would think that if you do this kind of thing, first of all, you have to have a purpose in mind. There is either some kind of healing that you seek, physical, emotional. There is clarity that you seek your life path or about yourself and or the universe and your place, your purpose, why you're here. Something in this direction is normally your purpose, why you're doing it. You have to be clear on your purpose and not just, hey, well, my friend has done it, I want to do it as well. And then, of course, is to be aware that what you're doing is something very serious and very sacred. Ayahuasca, for example, is called the death vine, not because it's going to kill you, but because it quite often puts you through a death experience.
Or at least the death of the ego.
Yeah, the ego always bounces back, but it might be temporarily cut out a little.
Yes.
Yes. Well, it is actually quite often, with ayahuasca, quite often it puts you through a death experience that will feel like you are physically dying. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that, because our fear of death is our greatest block. For a shaman, if you want to journey in the other world, you cannot go to all places, and you might find journeying difficult until you got over the fear of death. It's this fear of losing yourself, the fear of losing your body, of not being able to come back. A lot of people have that. So the reason why we as a society or the human race at the moment are so stuck in this negativity is because we are all really cowardly. If we stood up and did the right thing, we would solve the problems we're having in no time, but we don't do it because we're afraid that something could happen to us, like we could get kidnapped and killed, and everybody's really afraid. It's fear. And the ultimate fear, that is the root of all other fears, is death. So ayahuasca gets that out of the way. Once you get over the death fear, and you know there is really no death, then everything else in life gets a lot easier.
All right. Now, you mentioned, okay, you, of course, being a shaman, you know a whole lot about plants, but, you know, you list, of course, that there are 4 different uses, you know, the different types of sacred plants, food plants, journey plant or dream plants, etc. Can you tell us about the different types and what they might be used for?
Well, there are plants that have been eaten in sacred rituals, and these plants nourish us, not just our bodies but also our spirits. For example, the sacred corn is one of those plants that's been sacred to the Native Americans, but also in other cultures. Mm-hmm. And what we find now is that particularly those plants, the sacred food plants, are actually being targeted and being turned into GM plants.
Yeah, corn for sure. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And wheat, for example, was sacred to the goddess Isis. And personally, I find that wheat is actually a very strengthening and good plant. And the reason why so many people are reacting to it is because we used to have so many different types of wheat, and they have been reduced to just a few. Lots of it is locked up in the seed vault, of course, that we will never have any access to. And of course these allergies, where they originate, there's been information being put out that the vaccinations have a lot to do with leaky bowel syndrome, and that then leads to whatever has been in your guts on the day that you got vaccinated to become an allergen.
Oh, yeah, plus there are pesticides and such as well. I mean, we're not getting clean corn and wheat or pretty much clean anything unless you're doing it yourself.
It's getting more and more difficult, and it's really a pity because these plants are special, especially corn is a very, very good plant. So these are the sacred food plants that have been eaten during rituals, and some of them, like corn, whatever you charge them with in ritual will actually then go in your DNA.
What other sacred food plants are used in ceremony?
Well, not everything. Tobacco is one of the sacred plants. It's not exactly a food. You don't eat it, but it has healing properties, and I mentioned it in my article because it has also been altered, and now it's become a very negative plant. And again, it's one of the plants, but that is not true for the Amazonian tobacco that you can still get, which is unaltered. But again, it's one of these plants, like many plants, basically connect with our consciousness. So what you think of while you're preparing the plants will actually go in the plants. And this has been known in many, many cultures.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're same with cooking, really. I mean, any time you're working on something, you're putting your energy into it. So my kitchen, the main ingredient is love, and even in my homemade tobacco.
Yeah. It's especially true when you're baking bread with the grains. In the Vedic tradition, they believe that twice in a month at a particular day, the grains absorb sins, and then they shouldn't be eaten. And in some groups of people, like the Hare Krishna people, they only eat bread that was baked by the devotees because, while they baking it, then they're chanting songs to Krishna, say, and then this energy goes in the bread. And when we're eating the commercially made bread that's been made by machines, and the people maybe were cursing and angry and in bad mood on that day, all these energies go in there. And then it isn't really health-giving anymore.
Can you give us some tips on how we can find plants sacred to us?
Yeah, just go out in nature, in the forest or someplace, and just go there with the intention to find a plant that wants to work with you and that you could gain as an ally, and then just walk and see where you're being drawn. And when you find a plant, then sit down in front of the plant and just look at it for a while and be completely silent inside and outside. Just look at the plant and and absorb its appearance and what that means to you, and then let it speak to you. And you can touch a leaf or a part of the plant gently to make a connection, and then close your eyes and meditate, and the plant will actually speak to you. You're not going to hear it audibly loud, but you will hear it very clearly in your mind if you know how to listen. And you can let the plant tell you about itself, what it does, how it can work with you. For some people this will be easy, and some people need to train a little bit. It depends on whether you already know how to listen to your intuition, whether you know how to meditate, or whether this is all completely new territory for you. Then when the plant gives permission, then you can take a part of the plant with you, and if you know that the plant is edible and not poisonous, you can eat a little.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we had to follow the rules of foraging. Okay, so we must follow the rules of foraging then, and probably not stick it in our mouth unless we are confident that it is not poisonous.
It's very strange with me. There was one time I was walking in the woods, and I picked some things that I wanted for some shamanic work, and I picked a small bit of ivy, and I didn't know at that time that ivy is poisonous. It wasn't poison ivy, it was just ivy. And as I was holding something else, I was trying to take a branch. I stuck the ivy in my mouth temporarily, and some of the juice got on my tongue, and I knew instantly that it was poisonous. I just know it from the taste. And the other strange thing that I find with myself, that if it's poisonous, it gives me a boost. I always find that the poisonous plants to me is like very familiar, and it feels like not a kick that you get from something like having caffeine. It's like a recognition. I know it. I know it's poisonous, and it does me good. It seems to augment my power.
Yeah, well, I mean, even Paracelsus and so, I mean, they all used Hippocrates. I mean, we can go on and on. They all used what today we call poisonous plants. And I think there's a lot of fear-mongering going on with that. I mean, just because you touch a plant that somebody deems poisonous doesn't mean you're going to die. And if you accidentally, stick it in your mouth or whatever, I mean, one little drop or little leaf is not going to kill you. If you've meditated with your plant and you're out in the forest and such, and you really have the desire to stick it in your mouth or pick it up, go for it, I say.
If you're afraid of that you might eat something poisonous, choose something that you like, that you know it's not poisonous, like a rose or chamomile or lavender, something like that, and connect with this to start with. And then if you know that this plant can be eaten and you take a little bit of it internal, then you can actually do a shamanic journey with it. You can go in the underworld once you've eaten it. And in the underworld, you can find the spirit of the plant. And it will not normally look exactly like a plant. It will look like some kind of being. It may be very different from the plant. So you have to recognize the spirit of the plant, not by the look of it, but by the resonance. And then you can speak to the spirit of the plant, and you can ask in which ways it would like to work with you, and you can ask it whether it wants to be your ally, and if it agrees, then you can take it with you the way that you would take a power animal with you and bring it back to your safe place, and then you have made a connection.
When I grew up, we were told that all of that is poisonous. I mean, even dandelions, clover, chickweed, I mean, everything that was in our lawn, if it wasn't grass, it was poisonous, therefore we had to kill it.
I wasn't told such nonsense, fortunately.
Good. All right, good. So you got an earlier start than those of us who did grow up that way.
And maybe also cultural, because I grew up in Germany, and I think there is still some herb law, some ancient herb law there. We would actually go and collect things. My mother still puts daisies in her potato salad. And we collected dandelion leaves because people in Germany do seem to know that they are good for the liver and that they cleanse your body. When they were young, we put them in salads and ate them. When they're a bit older, then they get more bitter. So it is still edible, but maybe not so pleasant.
Okay, so you started off, you didn't have those fear of weeds and herbs and things that maybe some of us who grew up in cities and suburban areas.
No.
It's just so silly. We're brought up to fear Mother Nature. Yeah, I mean, I think I probably shared with you the first time someone suggested that I drink dandelion tea, and I'm like, huh? Okay, let me ask you this. What are some of the sacred herbs or food or plants, that you like to work with? And how did you stumble across them?
Okay, so let's get the list down. Ayahuasca was the first one I started with. And then you might know Jurima because it's sometimes used together with ayahuasca. Murapuama, which is another rainforest plant, is also one of them. And then I've done Salvia Divinorum that you mentioned before. What else? Thorn apple, which you call Datura.
Yes, it's Datura out here. Moonflower, even devil's trumpet, devil's weed.
Mandrake, I have a special connection with also, and then there's a poisonous plant, Henbane. Yeah, it's called Henbane because it was poisonous to chickens. You could kill a chicken with it, and why it was called Henbane. Are those the ones? Mandrake, Henbane.
Oh, that's pretty. Okay, I get to learn a new one. That is beautiful, though. This Henbane.
So. Yeah, well, the henbane it's a death plant. It'll put you through a death initiation, and the only reason why I took it is because I was told by the goddess, actually. Otherwise, by myself, I wouldn't have. And I have done a death initiation once in the woods where I had to take several poisonous plants and stay overnight in the woods by myself.
Nice.
And that was pretty heavy duty, yes. And that was with 3 of those plants. I started off with ayahuasca. I always believed that you can't be a real shaman until you've done ayahuasca at least once. Unfortunately, when I did it the first time, I did it with one of these false shamans who didn't do it in a correct way, and it had some very negative effects. The ceremony itself was done all wrong, and the preparation of the ayahuasca was not right either. However, before I took it the first time, here we're coming back to the preparation, I had journeyed to the spirit of ayahuasca already and spoken to her, and she had told me that time that she would put me through a death experience. And then in the actual ceremony, the first ceremony that we did, everybody else said nothing happened, and they were so disappointed, and they said it wasn't strong enough, and I had a near-death experience. It was very unpleasant. The first thing I noticed was that I was being shown all these different religious symbols, and as I now know, this was a clearing. Basically, the plants clear out all the religious conditioning that you've had, so that you're completely free to experience reality as it really is. And at that time, I thought I had already cleared all my religious conditioning, but apparently not. And it even showed me symbols of religions that I, like Jewish, Islam, and so on, that I didn't have any connection with in this lifetime. So it was clearing not only from this life the religious conditioning, but also from past lives. And this is part of what I wanted to say about to get to higher consciousness, you got to let go of all the conditioning first. Because as long as you have the blinkers on, you really can't see reality the way it is. And the sacred plants do that, especially ayahuasca. And then the other thing it did is it put me through this death experience. I started being like short of breath, and being a yogi, I immediately noticed it, and I tried to make my breath deep and slow, but it didn't work, which is unusual. And then I started having extreme irregular heartbeat and heart racing, and I thought at first, oh my God, what's happening here? It seems that I'm not made for that. Maybe I'm having some, reaction, because I really didn't know enough, and this fake shaman that I was with, he really did not prepare us at all. He just thought it was like a little drug thingy. And And I was struggling with this. I had also really strong pain in different areas of my body and in the heart. And all the pain stopped and all the suffering when I surrendered. And I accepted that I might even die now. That's when it all stopped.
So surrender is key.
Yeah, with sacred plants always. If you cannot surrender and you want it your way and you're afraid of having a painful, physically or emotionally painful experience, then you're really not made for that. You have to accept whatever comes and you have to be willing to experience whatever you need to experience without judging it. That was my first. The second one was interesting because it was very mellow, very mild, even though it was the same brew. So the brew, people always think it's, how much of DMT and other strange substances is there and how much of it do I need per body weight. I think this is total nonsense because the effect of the plant does not depend on any substance that goes in your bloodstream. It depends on the depth of your surrender, the clarity of your intent, and the sacredness of the preparation. These are really the key factors.
Now, let me ask you this, though. Ayahuasca, isn't that illegal in most countries? I mean, do we have to go to South America or go to the Amazon?
It's been recently made illegal in the UK. I haven't had it for over a year. Just let me mention that. It's being made illegal everywhere, you will see. I would not recommend, if it's illegal in your country, just don't take it, don't get in that trouble. I'm just wanting people to understand what is actually happening to the sacred plants. It is a crime that they are being taken away from us. Our avenue to universal consciousness, which is our birthright, is being taken away from us. And that's not the only avenue, because you can do the same thing through meditation, not only through the sacred plants, but it is faster with the plants. Especially for people who haven't got any concentration and they are very stuck in their ways. The plants seem to break through this barrier to enable them to, for the first time, experience a different reality, the expanded reality. And once they have experienced that, that can be motivation enough for them to maybe start meditation and spiritual practices. I don't think it's good to make oneself dependent on anything, even though these plants are not addictive. But it is not good to be dependent in a sense that you need one particular substance or tool or anything external from yourself to have avenue to cosmic consciousness. If you need that and it's being taken away from you, then you're helpless. So it's always good to train yourself so that all you need is your mind. But in the end, as I said, we don't have to be dependent, but I would still like to talk about it a little bit because this plant is the greatest healer plant on the planet. Full stop.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, everything. Not just emotional and spiritual healing, but physical healing as well. Yes. I've read stories or seen stories, cancer, tumors, pain, all sorts of things. Let me ask you about mimosa, because I guess that's used as a substitute where people cannot get ayahuasca.
Yeah, they are very, very different. I mean, ayahuasca is a healer plant. Jurima isn't exactly. It does work on your consciousness. It takes you into a deep space, into the void. I think it's a goddess plant. That's how I feel it, because it takes you into the deep earthy energy, the void and the darker emotions. It doesn't mean that you get dark emotions, but whatever that you didn't want to look at, it's going to get it out from the depths.
Okay, so you're saying ayahuasca is more of a healing vine than mimosa or jurima?
Yes. If you have a physical condition that you want to heal, then you would not go for the jurima so much. You'd rather go for the ayahuasca. But if you want to experience the void and go into the chaos, I don't mean the evil chaos, more like the creation chaos, then the jurima can be a good plant for that. But you have to be able to meditate, and this is really not for beginners. Beginners tend to completely freak out with jurima.
Oh, really? Why is that?
It just takes it to a really dark space. And if you're not afraid of the dark, then that's fine. But if you're afraid of the dark, this will be a horror trip.
Oh, okay, or could be.
The preparation method always makes a great difference. What's going to happen during the ceremony depends a lot on the state of the development of the shaman. I mean, somebody who's on a physically higher level will make a very different preparation from somebody who has this little drug addict mentality or just wants to earn some money. And the way the plant is being handled, from the harvesting to the cooking, and even if it's in the room and ready for the ceremony and people are talking negative things in the room, it does tend to go in the brew. So to have a really good ceremony, everything has to be done very exact. From the harvesting, unfortunately, I could never do that myself because I couldn't go to the rainforest and harvest it there. But once you have got the plant harvested, where it's even stored, and when you cook it, the people that are around when you cook it, then you have to sing the sacred songs during the cooking, and then there has to be a sacred space before you begin the ceremony. You have to do a banishing ritual to get rid of any negative spirit beings that might be hanging around, and the people should be very focused on their intent, and they should be in a state of purity, physical and mental, when they enter the ceremonial hall, and should really focus on getting benefit for themselves and the healing, instead of looking what their neighbor is doing or interfering with them during the ceremony. If people go and touch others during the ceremony and interfering and talking back and forth with them, then it's not a ceremony.
Now, you mentioned earlier DMT, and of course that's pretty much the main ingredient, but it's also being produced in our brain. But also, what do you think about ingesting, say, smokable DMT? I guess there's a way that people are able to separate or extract it from the plant. Is that something that's used in ceremony, or what are your thoughts on that?
I've never done it, and I would never do it. Even if it was legal and I could get it on the street corner for 10 cents, I wouldn't take it.
Okay, and why would you never try it?
Well, this is not the plant spirit. This is a chemical substance, then I might as well take pharmaceutical drugs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that. I've read a little bit about the preparation online. Of course, I did have a chance to talk with somebody that does make it, and I asked him, well, what happens when you're adding these chemicals? And they tried to tell me that it evaporates and that it doesn't affect the plant at all. But you're saying the opposite, that it does affect it.
A plant is like a living being. You've got arms and legs. If somebody cuts off a part, it's not the same thing anymore. All the different components that the plant has, they work together as a whole. And if you isolate one single component, you will get side effects and it won't be the same. And this is also not a sacred preparation. This is the way of the lazy man, and it's the shortcut, and the shortcut never leads to the same place. Not with shamanism and not with attaining higher consciousness, because there isn't really a shortcut for higher consciousness. Isn't that the truth? Okay, yeah, well, you confirmed my suspicions, because it just, okay, well, I mean, and then speaking of media and such, we have people like Joe Rogan who have kind of popularized it, and we even had a gentleman on my show talking about smoking DMT, and, we occasionally hear it on other shows, but that's not the sacred natural way. You're saying that's kind of a shortcut. Why would people be popularizing it so much? Well, it's easy. Anybody could do it, isn't it? You just have to take the stuff. There's no long preparation involved. For ayahuasca, you're actually busy for 2 days preparing it.
Well, I guess whoever is making or extracting it, that takes some type of preparation, but I forget what it is. It's something like paint thinner, or I don't know.
Where are the prayers? Where are the sacred songs? And I'm sure the plant doesn't like it to be treated like this. You're not connecting with the spirit of the plant anymore. There is no more spirit. It's only chemical reaction.
So it's basically the same as smoking crack.
Well, I don't even know these things. To tell you the truth, I'm totally illiterate when it comes to street drugs. I've never taken any, and I haven't got a clue about them.
I wouldn't be able to educate you on that myself, but it's either cocaine or crystal or one of the ones that people normally do up their nose, and then I don't know what they do, actually, so if somebody does know, call in, but maybe they mix it with, like, baking soda or something and make it in, like, a rock, and then they smoke it.
I've never taken any of these things. However, I have met people who did, and I can tell you they all ended up very messed up in their mind.
Oh, yeah. I'm not to try or go close to anything like that, and for a reason. I have met people that have, and no offense if you are one of those people, but I've seen it destroy lives completely. But I mean, what you're saying about the process and of the extracting the DMT with the chemical solvents and such, it kind of sounds to me like it's the same as like cocaine or crack or one of those.
It never works when you extract something. It's not the same as if you have the whole thing, because you need to connect with the spirit of the plant. And
right.
And it has to be done in a sacred way, that throughout the whole preparation you have to pray to the spirit of the plant and sing the sacred songs that this particular plant has, or the ones that the plant has taught you. And this is not the case with anything that's made in a lab. And I would be very cautious, even ayahuasca, and there are very few people that I would trust to prepare it for me. Actually, the only one I really trust is if I do it myself, and there's one other shaman that I trust to prepare it right. Other than that, I wouldn't take it from other people, because if they're not in a good spiritual state, then I know that it's not going to give me that much benefit at all. Something to consider, whether there's been a sacred preparation, and if not, you're not dealing with sacred plants, you're dealing with a drug trip.
So that's what it seems they're trying to popularize with the big names, working out in the gym all day, smoking DMT at night, and that's not really how it was intended. And you're kind of dishonoring these sacred plants and all of the magical abundance and wisdom and insight that they have for us.
Yeah, and that then gives a bad name to those people who really do it in a sacred way.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about that Salvia, the Miley Cyrus thing, and she's some, I guess, little actress, entertainer, singer or something. Probably a teenager, but I don't know. I don't catch up with Hollywood either. But there's no way. I mean, it just makes me wonder, what are they trying to do? Hollywood and the media with Salvia, DMT, pretending that people who were high and drinking beer and partying and obviously they're demonizing it. They're taking away the innate value and wonder and just, I don't know, turning it into this yucky, perverted, drug-type culture mentality.
And it's not like that at all. I have seen people really completely changing for the better, becoming better people through working with the sacred plants. People who hated their parents loved them and saw that they were wrong for hating their parents. People who blamed others understood that they had nobody to blame but themselves. And this doesn't happen when you take a substance. When you take a substance, you have a trip, and then it's over, and you're the same you, maybe even worse than before. But if you do the sacred plants in the right way, they change you. And it is not always pleasant when they change you, because the ego wants to hold on to the old patterns and wants to be always right and not admit that you might have done something wrong. And then the plants show it to you.
Okay. All right, so we've talked about, ayahuasca, Jerima, mimosa, salvia. We kind of touched on that. Can you tell us a little bit more about salvia and what it entails and why one would choose to smoke salvia?
Yeah, this is a plant that can show you different things. One of the things that it's very good at is to release negative identities. So you pray with the plant to release negative identities, such as maybe you have a victim complex or you got a martyr complex. And once you have your intent clear that you want to get rid of the idea that you are a loser or that you are a victim or whatever whatever it is that doesn't serve you anymore, you pray to the plant to release that, and then you smoke it, and then you meditate with it. The first time I had it, I remember that it was very mild, but it showed me visions. And I'd like to clarify here, the visions. It's not that these are pictures that I, under normal circumstances, never see, because I do get visions all the time. I get them when I'm in the forest, I get them when I'm meditating, I get them when I look in the water or at the clouds, I get visions. But anyway, so it showed me visions, and the visions that it showed me seemed at first very trivial, because it showed me all these houses. One looked like the other, with a neat lawn in front and a mailbox, and then I realized what it was doing. It was showing me the kind of bit like the American dream, how we are all made the same, and we think we have to have the house and the car and the dog and the 2.5 statistical children, and that this whole reality is completely false. This is not what we are here for.
Okay, now Salvia, I mentioned the Miley Cyrus one, but it was also in the media recently, maybe 2 months ago, where they publicized 2 kids went and smoked it, I guess in Pennsylvania, and one of them fell off a cliff and died.
I mean, you don't do a sacred ceremony sitting at the edge of a cliff, yeah? Yes, I mean, you want to be undisturbed. You want to have set up sacred space, and of course, you don't want anything dangerous around. You're not going to have knives lying around in the room or be by the edge of a cliff, and you're not going to get in your car and drive it or operate your lawnmower. You're going to stay put in your room, and where there's nothing dangerous, where you can fall down, and you have to set your intention that you're not going to run around in the room. People who run around and freak out are people who haven't emotionally and mentally prepared, and people who are not surrendering. If you're surrendering, there's no need to run anywhere. But with those plants, you just want to be in a position where you are already lying, that nothing can happen. Needless to say, you shouldn't have had any alcohol or any other things that are not compatible with the plant. You should have fasted and not overloaded your stomach.
Like do not do what Miley Cyrus did, that whole drinking and screaming, and that is not a proper method for Salvia.
No, anybody who's screaming is not surrendering. And anybody who's drinking isn't doing anything sacred. But I think a lot of the problems with salvia that I've heard of, and that you maybe have heard of, have to do with people not actually taking the real salvia, but the extract. So we come back to the same thing as with the extracted DMT. This is not a sacred shamanic ceremony, but this is a drug addict's dream.
Oh, okay. So there's a difference between real salvia. They also make an extract?
There is an extract, and they have like 4 times, 8 times strength and things like this. I've heard of it.
If you would, can you tell us about Mandrake and why people would choose to use Mandrake?
Mandrake is a power plant. I first was told about it by one of my guides when I was going through a very rough time, and I wasn't even told to take it. I was first only told to find it, and I thought I have to use it maybe in magic, so I didn't think I could find it, but I found it the very same day. And then I was told how to prepare it for myself. It was a very low dosage, and I needed to fast a whole day, actually, before it, with absolutely no food. And I found it very empowering. It can put you in touch with your power. If it's done in the right way, you can't take very large quantities. It's kind of toxic, and it can negatively affect your liver. So this is something you can't do very often. This is like a once in a while and in a low dosage. And you have to have proper preparation, and you have to have guidance that this is what you need to do. You don't just do it because somebody else does it or because you want to try it out.
Okay, and how do you do? Is it leaves? Is it roots? Is it how do you smoke it? Do you drink it? Eat it?
Root. It's a root, and you have to boil the root for a certain time. And I would never use anything. Yes. Usually you get the root chopped in little pieces, and then you boil it. You make a decoction. I would never take the powder. I'm totally against taking any powder things because you don't know what's been mixed in there, and with a powder you can take too much, so it gets too intense because it goes too deep in your tissues. I'm always for working with the herb as it is. In this case, in Mandrake, it's the root that is used, not the leaves. But you have to be clear that this is one of the more dangerous plants. Ayahuasca is not dangerous. Mandrake is.
Oh, really? So what are there side effects, or what are the dangers?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how strong you make it, but it can have side effects. It can give you nausea. It can give you visual distortion, double vision. And I didn't get it when I prepared it myself. I had it once when somebody else prepared it. That was not good for me. When I had my own, I didn't have the visual distortion. It makes the eyes very dry in the mouth. So these are some of the side effects. You need water nearby because you will get very dehydrated. And it is not visual, so you're not going to get any visions. If you think there'll be fireworks or it makes you go into an alternate dimension, no. It can bring up emotions. For me, it triggered the Kundalini, which already was going at that time, but that probably wasn't a good time. When I took it with somebody else, I took it when I had active Kundalini, and that made things go haywire. Mm-hmm. I ended up having a complete cathartic emotional release that was very difficult to handle.
Another one, okay, you call it thorn apple, and we call it devil's trumpet, devil's weed, or Datura, which is more commonly known. Can you tell us about some of the uses of Datura, or, what do you call it again? Thorn apple.
First of all, I'd like to say that it's sacred to Shiva. And this is why I took it in the first place. It's a sacred plant to Shiva, and it's worshipped by Shaivites, people who worship Shiva. They hold the plant sacred. And this is a very dangerous plant. So let's discuss it, but just in a scholarly interest rather than as an instruction manual for people. Because I've heard of people, they smoked 3 thorn apple seeds and went completely crazy.
Wow.
But what it does when it's properly done, it can help you with astral projection, and it also helps to let go of limitations, basically, in your mind. And the plant is very poisonous, and the seeds are more dangerous. I've never taken the leaves. The seeds are more dangerous than the leaves. So this is something you should only do if you are an experienced shaman, if you have had inner guidance, and if you're working with a plant in a sacred way. This should never be done for the fun of it or to try it out, because then it can go wrong.
Okay, so I guess when using Datura, it would be the seeds and the leaves? And it's to smoke, not to drink or eat?
There are also preparations where you can drink it. I've never done that. If you familiar with the Carlos Castaneda books, he's actually talking about an experience where they prepared the roots and the seeds and the leaves, and he had quite a horror experience with it in the book. I did never have a horror experience with this plant. It is not toxic to me either. Probably because I worship Shiva, and I have never had a trip on it. Let's just clarify that. I just use it for dreaming, basically. I've never had a vision.
Dreams, then.
Yeah, and to get dreams on the topic that I wanted, or when I need specific guidance. That's how I take it. And but I've known of people who couldn't handle. So this is not something I want to instruct anybody in. Here's my disclaimer. If you take it, it's on your own, risk. These plants, they're all sacred to particular gods and goddesses. I'm not sure about Salvia Divinorum, but I know thorn apple is sacred to Shiva. It's also sacred to Hecate, and I'm a priestess of Hecate. And Mandrake is sacred to Hecate, and so is Henbane.
Okay.
And so if you have a connection to a particular deity, sometimes you can connect by taking their sacred plants, and then if you do it in a devotional way, this will work very different from somebody who's just wanting to have a kick. People who do this with the wrong intention often get punished by the sacred plants anyway. You choose the plant, but you could also say the plant chooses you. In my case, the plant quite often showed up during my shamanic journeys, or even in dreams. I was told about certain plants, how to take them even, or they just showed up and attracted my attention.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a connection with these plants. Sometimes this connection even goes back to past lives.
Oh, yes, that's true. And you shared with us how kind of some of these plants chose you, and how we can go out and kind of make connections and see what would feed us, either our heart or soul or physical healing, etc.
Yes, we talked about this a little bit. For example, there's such a thing as a signature of a plant, which has to do with the way it looks quite often. Say, for example, if you're having a problem with a particular part of your body and you find a plant that has this kind of shape, say it's kidney-shaped or something, then it is said in plant medicine that this plant then has an effect on a subtle level, may not have it biochemically, on this organ. And so you can go out and you can open your senses to nature, and you can ask, let me find a plant that will help me with, and it can either be a physical problem, or it can also be something like dreaming, or help me to get abundance, or whatever it is that you are seeking.
Okay, so kind of like vegetables, if, the vegetable kind of looks or resembles like a part of your body, we know that's good for you. It's also the same with plants.
It's like this with all plants. I mean, vegetables are plants, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, herbs and such like that don't have distinctive fruits that, say, look like a kidney bean or a carrot or a tomato. Okay, that's really good to know. Are you saying the shapes of the leaves? Or the flowers, or?
They can be the shape of the fruit or the leaves, or even the colors that they have. Say, for example, if you wanted something to get more passion in your life, you would probably need something red color. Lots of plants that have red color blossoms.
All right, I need some of that.
Yes. And when people say, well, this is some silly superstition, how can that have anything to do? You have to understand that everything is energy on this planet. So cosmic consciousness, what you would call God or whatever you want to call it, all that is speaks to us through the symbols, through the colors. Everything is frequency. You can actually measure the frequency of a color, and the chakras have their colors and frequencies. So this is actually quite scientific when you think of it, that cosmic consciousness speaks to us in the language of symbols through colors and shapes. It tells us what we need to know, and if we can understand the language of symbols, then we open our mind to an enormous reservoir of wisdom.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, Shakti, then going by colors. Okay, you mentioned if you need a little more love in your life, you'd probably want to add some red, but going by the chakras, your heart would be green. So does that mean we need more of both?
Well, actually, the color for the heart chakra is green originally, but also pink, because pink has to do with love in a non-sexual way, such as self-love also. That's why you can use crystals like rose quartz on the heart chakra. And, of course, the red is more love in a physical way. So you wanted to have some passion or have a new sexual relationship, then you'd like to use the red color.
Yeah, okay, because we know that chakra is red. Okay. All right, I'll take some
chakra,
of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if I was going to get myself in trouble with that question. Okay, so we'll stick with both, red and green.
Oh, well, you want to get some pink there, yeah? You want to have a bit of love from the heart. That's the color pink.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay. Now, all right. Now, plants, of course, I mentioned in the intro, and of course, I'm sure we all know that, of course, they have like the food bills and such, and trying to outlaw growing your own food. In fact, someone, I think it was in the UK, was just arrested and fined $1,000 for growing cucumbers in his basement. And of course, we know marijuana, ayahuasca, bitter almond trees and such have been banned here in the U.S. And then we hear that shamans and such are going to prison for using sacred plants. What's going on here? How is it that people feel that they can outlaw that which is natural?
Well, people feel they can do whatever they can get away with. If people feel they can get away with murder, some people will actually do it. Mm-hmm. And this is a control system, very clearly. It's about controlling the human race. And if you want to control people, the best way of doing it, besides by brute force, which doesn't work too well, because we are many, many people and the controllers aren't that many, so they have to control our minds. And mind is really over matter. If you have somebody who's physically very strong, but you can make them believe, say, by hypnosis, that they are small and weak and powerless, it will be very easy to overcome that person. And what is being done now is to control the human race with fear, with fake laws that forbid us things that God has given us. Food, the plants on this earth that are for us to use, even the land, that the land should be owned, is very ridiculous. Completely agree with the Native Americans. We are not permitted to do anything natural anymore. Everything is regulated. And the sacred plants, the reason why this is being so persecuted, I would like to actually say, because it's becoming like a witch hunt now, is because sacred plants open our consciousness, expand us completely. Shamanism doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take plants. Not all shamans are working with plants to expand their consciousness. It is one form of shamanism, and it may be suitable for some people and not so suitable for other people. But, you know, when one plant gets taken away from us, say ayahuasca, which is now almost illegal all over, some people will say, okay, it's not a big deal, I never took it anyway, and I don't like these kind of mind-altering things anyway. But what is going to be next? Is it going to be lavender or rosemary, and where do we draw the line?
Yeah, absolutely. Very good question. You know, as part of your article here on sacred plants, you talk about how we lost the lore of herbs. Can you expand upon or elaborate on that a little?
I think that this all started with a witch hunt, virtually. Most people think the witch hunt was about, you know, evil witches, but really this was about control, and specifically male control over women. And at that time, women were the healers. It wasn't men who were in charge of healing like now, where you got mostly male doctors, not only, but it's still very much a male domain. Women were the healers because by our nature, we have more of a watery nature. We are more connected to the moon. We have a different type of intuition. And for a healer, intuition is very important. It's also been said that the most powerful shamans are usually female. I did never think this could be true until I heard it from various people myself. But apparently women have a specific power to dive into this consciousness more easily than men. I think men are more rational minds, so it's a bit more difficult for them to tap into it. But anyway, during the witch hunt, it was about outlawing women to do healing. And then also even the midwifery was taken over by men, and we know how that ended up. That didn't go too well. And at that time, women were being punished and killed and persecuted for as much as knowing how to read and write. When men did it, it was okay. And men that were healing with herbs and making potions were not normally killed as witches. Might have been a couple, but it was still acceptable for men to do this. But as soon as a woman did healing with herbs, she was a witch and she was put to death. And it ended up with a lot of the lore of the plants, which was passed on through generations being lost because it had to go underground. And then the men took over, and they had control of the medical system, and they didn't know much more than cutting people to let their blood out and putting leeches on them. And we're having now the same. Now we're having a takeover of the pharmaceutical industry. Fascism, really. When corporations run the world, it's called fascism. I didn't know that, but I had to educate myself. We're having fascism, corporations taking over, and they want to give us these chemical drugs that they can control and they can make us dependent on, rather than us having herbs to heal ourselves.
Oh, yeah, and even in a lot of cases, actually court ordering people to take drugs. I mean, this is literally a witch hunt because, you know, there's people going to jail now for using plants or for healing people with plants. They're calling Interpol and, arresting and charging these doctors and healers and shamans as criminals. I mean, where is it going to end? And how? It's
going to go much further. It will go to the point, I think, where people are going to die in droves. I really think that. They're going to forbid you to even speak to a friend. If you give a recommendation, say somebody's got a headache, and you say, oh, rosemary is very good for that, that would be illegal to say that, and you'd probably get some kind of charge for practicing medicine without a license, and I don't know for how many years of jail you would have to sit that out for, according to their insane system. But it is really about gagging us, forbidding us free speech, forbidding us to pass information from one human being to another. And
to choose what's best for us and our bodies.
Exactly. As when you lose control over your body, you're not better than a cow.
Yes. Yeah, poor cows.
You're not any better than a cow. And I think a lot of things they're doing to the cattle, they're now doing to us.
If we were allowed to use these plants, how would they help us attain higher consciousness? And what would be the consequences of that?
Well, when you tap into higher consciousness, you understand that everything is energy, and you also understand that everything is alive in the universe, and that everything has consciousness and has a soul, really, and you can connect with everything. You see no more differences. You see only unity, and you're in a state of love, indescribable love. So once you have experienced that and you've seen the beauty of everything, you can't destroy things anymore. You could never destroy a forest for profit anymore. You won't go around and exploit other living beings. You would never want to hurt or kill another man. Never mind what color they are or religion. You just understand that everything is one. And that would change the world.
What awful side effects there.
Yeah, this is absolutely, any government has to immediately put a stop to this.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
We'd be actually all loving each other and sharing with each other and helping each other, knowing that all is one. That's what would happen. That's the terrible thing that has to be avoided. I think that the awakening, which is already happening, the global awakening, would be very greatly sped up if we had full access to those sacred plants. I mean, if it was permitted, look, we could do ceremonies with 100 people. Every one of these people comes out a transformed human being.
Okay, let me ask you this then. How, maybe chemically or biologically speaking, how do these plants help open those windows? How does this happen? Do we know how they work?
I haven't studied chemistry. I'm an idiot when it comes to chemistry. I didn't even have it in school, so I have no clue how it works chemically. I have heard about it. Yes,
Let's unlearn.
In the end, it is all energy, really, and you find out that you can manipulate things on an energetic level without having to know scientific labels for it. The ancient yogis had powers that go way beyond what we think is possible in this reality, yet it is possible. I have personally experienced things which shouldn't be possible for a human being, yet I have experienced them. So I don't really need to know what these chemicals are called. I don't think that it is anything chemical that does it. I think it is because the plant connects us to this unified consciousness. And in that unified consciousness, the mind of God is everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. Everything is in there. And it all exists simultaneously. It's like the internet, It's all in there, but then you choose what page you're going to. You might have a little bit of problems with the Google search function. But similar, if you reach the highest stage, you actually have a state of complete omniscience. I have experienced that. You can't stay in that state for good because otherwise you are incapable of functioning in this physical world. So you have to come down somewhat so that you can function again. And then it is almost like having a space telescope. You can look anywhere you want, but you have to think first what you want to see selectively. So even though everything is there simultaneously, you choose what you're going to look at.
Okay, you choose what you get to look at. So are you saying if you're maybe in a ceremony or using one of these plants, you're introduced to, or I guess let's say many veils are kind of removed and then you have a choice on, or I guess using your intent, what you want to focus on, right?
Exactly, Christy, good word, intent. I always like to come back to that because the intent is ever so important. Okay. The plant itself has intelligence. And and you pray and you set your intent and you pray for healing of a particular issue that you're having or several issues. And the plant knows what is in the way of your healing. Yeah, maybe it's your ego, maybe it's a past life trauma, maybe something that happened to you in your childhood. Whatever it is, it'll bring it to the surface. And because the plant is intelligent, it also knows how much you can take.
Okay.
And some healing isn't possible in one go. There are layers to the problem, and they have to be removed bit by bit. People cannot, if their mind is very narrow and very rigid, you cannot expand it too much or they crack up. So it has to be done in stages.
Let's say I'm able to attend an ayahuasca ceremony in South America where it's legal. And I choose to, let's say I wanted help releasing maybe anger or rage or hurt or things like that. Is it possible that I would experience something other than that during the course of this healing?
The answer to this is yes. For example, if you intended to release your anger and hurt, the plant spirit may decide to go to the source of where the anger and hurt is and show you the traumatic scenes, say in your childhood or in your adult life or in a past life or whatever, the source of your disempowerment. And then anger, for example, is actually a sign that you have been disempowered. So it may alternatively also take you back to a lifetime when you were very powerful or show you how great your power really is. And then when you understand your power and have it back, the anger goes automatically because you're no longer disempowered. Because if we cannot control our mind, it kind of takes over. But I have seen dark beings, yes, but they weren't usually nasty to me. I have seen entities when I had ayahuasca. I saw them being released even as I threw them up. I have seen some scary ancestors and some beings that wanted to, tell me to come over to the dark stuff they were doing. I didn't go along with it. I can only honestly tell you, I've been to the land of the dead, that nothing really scares me that much.
Okay, so, it could be a gateway to other worlds or other dimensions to see things, but you mentioned it could be people's fears, and you had no fear. maybe it could have something to do with people's, not just their fears, but their perceptions. Because from what I'm understanding here is that when you take one of these substances, you know, as you mentioned before, you're basically having your ego stripped away. You're facing your ego. You're looking at this big mirror on the wall. So maybe if you're seeing demons and experiencing, you know, scary, harsh experiences like that, could it perhaps be a mirror reflection of yourself?
Yeah, people that haven't integrated their shadow, they tend to see demons, because anything that is kind of dark, that is within them, they just demonize it and turn it into an external demon that they can put the blaming finger on. I mean, these things exist on the astral, so when people focus, when their vibration is low, they focus on lower levels of the astral, and there you see all kind of weird things, dark and nasty things as well. And then also in a ceremony, the energies of all the people in the ceremony together work together as a whole. Say if you got somebody who's been reading all these reptilian books and stuff, and he got that in his brain, other people are going to pick up on it as well. And if they got these fears in themselves, like they have a terrible fear of snakes or the devil, and then or demons, that demons could control them. I've heard from quite a lot of people who told me that they're terrified that demons could take them over, and I always say, no, they cannot, unless you allow them to. If your will is strong, nothing takes you over. If I see something dark in a ceremony, then I'm asking Ayahuasca, why are you showing me this? Can you explain this to me? If I see a dark being, I'll talk to them. I ask them, who are you? Why are you showing up? What is it that you want? And instead of going in shivering and fear and trying to run away there.
So, all right, so getting back to higher consciousness, you talked about some of the consequences, real dire consequences that could occur if the public were introduced to these sacred plants. But you've also, you shared with us some healing stories and stuff as well. Do you mind sharing maybe a significant transformation maybe in your life or someone else's life so that we can better understand how it can affect the individual?
There was one ceremony, actually, in which I experienced a complete oneness with the goddess Hecate that was quite amazing, and that made me really aware of my power, and I felt this great love for the goddess. And I could stretch my awareness out over the earth. That was before I had self-realization, but it was starting to go in this direction already at that time. I had another one where I experienced oneness with the goddess Kali, and I remember the most amazing thing about that ceremony was this incredible sense of peace. I was at that time in a time of my life where there was total chaos, nothing was going right. I was in a state of sadness, grief, my personal life had fallen apart, relationships and everything, and there I was, and once I tapped into this, once I connected with Kali, I felt so peaceful. It was like nothing could move me, nothing could shake me, and everything was just bliss. It was after that Kundalini started to get really active. So this was definitely life-transforming because it opened the door to the full Kundalini experience, which came 1.5 years later. But that was the first step. And it made me, for the first time, it made me realize that even when things are not perfect on the outside, that even if you are in pain, physical pain or emotional pain, you can find that inner stillness where everything is okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about your Kundalini experience?
Yeah, that was in the beginning pretty traumatic. I mean, after it first became active, I had a cathartic emotional release, and I didn't know about that. I always thought Kundalini, okay, it's kind of hot, it burns a bit, goes to the crown chakra, kaboom, self-realization. That's what I thought it would be like. No, that was a very simplified and ignorant version of it. But what it really does, that is anything that's in the way of enlightenment, and that's all your negative stored emotions of this lifetime and other lifetimes that are in there somewhere, need to come out. So I remember that after that, the next day, just saying goodbye to some people who were leaving. And all of a sudden, I started to feel really weird, and I had this strange pressure in my head, and I felt like I couldn't say what. So I went to my room, and I lay down in the bed. By the time I reached the room and I reached the bed, I just threw myself on it, and I was crying. I was howling and wailing, and part of me was watching this and was thinking, oh my God, what are you doing? And what kind of sounds are you making? Pull yourself together. But there wasn't a pulling together. It was like a machine that once you started it, it wouldn't stop. Then in between the howling and wailing, I was laughing my head off because it was just so funny that I should make such silly sounds, and I didn't even know what I was crying about. And it was going, howling, laughing. Fortunately, nobody was there to witness that. They would immediately have sectioned me. But this is actually quite normal when Kundalini releases these stored-up emotions. That's why I always say that you better be alone or you be with people who know what's going on, because other people won't get it. Mm-hmm. And it lasted about 15 minutes, and that time my boyfriend was around, and then he said, should we pack up our stuff now? And I was back to normal.
And, it kind of reminds me of an experience I had recently, and I really, probably don't even know how to describe it, but I'm going to try to do my best and ask you, I don't know, could that have been a Kundalini experience as well? But basically, I was meditating, and I was in, I'll just say, a space. I don't really know where, and I can't really be sure. But there was a woman there, beautiful, and, kind of kneeling down, and it was very sparse, temple-like, I would say, but I can't be sure. Anyways, there was a window with this beautiful light shining in, those beautiful rays, and so I kind of looked at it, and then it kind of like sucked me up into, I don't know, somewhere in the universe. Looked like beautiful white fluffy clouds, and there were almost kind of like jewels, but I can't even be sure if they were jewels, just beautiful, bright, vibrant. They looked like, rubies and sapphires and emeralds, and that's what it looked like to me. But anyway, it was almost like I got hooked up, like I was getting an EKG or something at the hospital with kind of these probes or electrodes coming from the white, beautiful, clear, most beautiful space that kind of hooked up to my head and went down my spine. My entire body was vibrating. It was orgasmic. It was very, not in a sexual way. Please don't get me wrong, but it was a very, very good, wonderful, beautiful feeling. It was electric. It lasted like an hour or something, and I was, I kind of went through the same thing you did. At first I was like, what? And then after I was like laughing and thinking, what the heck is this? So, I don't know. Could that be a version, I guess, or my Kundalini experience?
Yes, I think so. It sounds to me as if some higher beings helped you along a bit and sped it up for you a bit, and the ethereal planes that you are describing sounds like higher planes that you've been to. On the higher planes, everything is if you go to some of the higher planes, there aren't really much solid shapes, and I also often see crystals during my journeys and experiences. And I work with them as well. And
they were just so very bright and vibrant, and, I didn't know what was going on, but I'm thinking, okay, just maintain it's cool. Christy, I think you kind of always wanted this anyways, so just try to, I was kind of talking to myself, but at the same time it was beautiful. I was willing. It wasn't scary at all, but my mind, I didn't know where I was, what I was doing, so I guess it was just hard for me to comprehend, but yeah, it definitely felt like or looked like jewels, and, it wasn't necessarily probes or electrodes or, like what you would see in a hospital. It just kind of felt like that. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. But there was certainly just this burst of energy that's really indescribable. I did feel very clean and whole. I felt very connected, ecstatic. But I mean, I guess I never was really sure. I guess it's getting back to the meditation thing. Am I doing this right? What am I supposed to expect? What's going on here? But good. Okay. But I guess it's fair to say that each's experience, Kundalini awakening, or any type of experience is completely individual. So it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly like yours or exactly like mine or anyone else we've read about.
No, and then again, was just a small part of the awakening. If that was all, and I wouldn't think that Kundalini was worth much, you know.
Yeah.
But it's just like it flushes out the negative things, and then I did have the waves of bliss also, Christie. And when I had self-realization and people said, how was that? I said, like 10,000 orgasms, and even that's really an understatement. And you can't really compare it. A physical orgasm, because it is just way beyond it, the bliss.
Yes.
And the waves of bliss, I had them, but I had also other things. I had physical side effects that weren't pleasant, pain in different parts of the body, and I had states of where I just knew everything with people, what was wrong, where their problems came from, what their issues were. And other people noticed it also after I had this Kundalini experience, that I suddenly knew a lot of things when I was doing healing. So if there is no change in your consciousness, in your character, and in your ability to know things, then the Kundalini hasn't really gone very far. But in the initial stages, when it makes its way upward, it flushes out all kind of things that are in the way, and the stored emotions have to come out.
Okay, well then let me ask you this, because yes, it absolutely, there was definitely a change. I started remembering more and more of my dreams. I just started to, well, as you said, know things. I mean, know more things, I guess. Things just kind of came to me, and there was definitely a cleansing in my life right there. But let me ask you this. Okay, so we have that beautiful experience. We have that oneness. We feel that one with everything, and everything is good and beautiful, etc. We feel confident, we feel enriched, we feel, and we're doing what we can. Let me ask you this. Why is it that, why do we lose it? And I don't obviously not lose it entirely, but we kind of forget about it. And I'll just speak for myself. I mean, hello, I had that experience, but since then, I've had pretty dark experiences. It's like where I'm questioning, why are we even here? And so I would call those pretty dark. They were kind of the opposite of how I was feeling. So why is it? How can we go from flying so high to just, I guess, basically forgetting that state that we can attain? And how can we possibly prevent going there? Or can we? Can we at all? Do we have to experience the ups and the downs? Or what's going on here, Shakti?
Well, there's a few things I'd like to say about it. First of all, sometimes we're not completely ready, but the universe gives us a little candy and lets us know how nice it is. And then once you've tasted it, you want to have it again. So you will actually start doing spiritual practices. That's the point of it, so that you see, I could have that, and then you should exert. The other reason why things sometimes go very dark is because as you're coming into your power, as the Kundalini rises, you are becoming an illumined human being, which means you become all-powerful, and you would become a force of good in this world. Not the only force of good, because there are many others, but you become a great force of good. And of course the other side that wants to bring about a slave planet doesn't like to have a lot of enlightened human beings around. And the other side, there are entities and demons, if you want to call them that, and negative beings are going to try to pull you down and create maximum pain in your life, so that you don't go on with your spiritual practices and you lose faith and maybe commit suicide and give it all up.
So you're saying that there's other entities at play here, that it's not just a normal human experience. We're stressed and we're supposed to experience it all?
Well, generally after the Kundalini awakening, I've heard that many go through a kind of dark night of the soul, and I had my own, and it was very, very heavy. And part of it is just in the process, because you're kind of half-baked. You're in between. You can't go back to who you were before, and you still don't know who you're going to be. And part of it is also really the extreme situation we are living in. It was very different for the yogis, say, 1,000 or 2,000 years ago when they had self-realization, than for us, we're living in an environment that is completely toxic. It's actually forbidden for Kundalini to take any, toxic substances and impure foods. All of our foods are impure because they've been sprayed with pesticides. They're not organic, artificial fertilizers. Then we have the GM things that is polluting everything. Then it gets packed in plastic and in metal cans that have been sprayed with toxic chemicals. We are just so toxic. And when the Kundalini awakens, it tries to throw out all the poison from your body and your mind. And there is just so much because we're living in such an unnatural way of life. We've been told so much nonsense that is not true through the education system. So it is much more difficult for us to free our minds from the false conditioning than it was for people 2,000 years ago. We're brainwashed by the TV.
Yeah.
But I think the most important factor if you want to raise the Kundalini and have higher consciousness is you need a personal connection to God. God is all that is. And you have to develop faith and have a regular practice, a spiritual practice that no matter what, if the walls are tumbling down, whatever's happening or the earth is quaking, you got your meditation and you have your devotional practices. And to keep you strong, keep you connected to the divine so that you get some help from there.
Okay, so basically just make that a priority. Make spending that time with yourself and devoting to your spiritual practice, make that a priority.
Yes, but it's not just yourself and your personal time and doing something for yourself, because the average selfish man does that also.
yeah, that's true. But I mean, what I'm saying is we become so distracted, and I'll just speak for myself here. I know that when I'm kind of down, the last thing I think about is meditating or, doing something positive for myself, such as juicing or going outside, those types of things. So that's what I mean, nourishing, something to feed your soul.
Yes, absolutely. But I really think I want to stress that you have to have a connection to God or Goddess in some form. And that's the thing that's going to get you through these really difficult tribulations that you will go through, and you will be tested.
Okay, so just focus on that and, make that your main staple. Very good advice, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we've already been tested, all of us. We're all going to do it again. There isn't just some magic pill, potion, lotion, sacred plant that's going to make all human pain go away. That's not exactly the way it is. And, it's nice to just... yeah, you can't avoid it. So I think, what did somebody say here? I think it was Tobias maybe. You're going to go through it one way or another. You can either go through it kicking and screaming, or you can just go through it. And I think it was Dr. Jane earlier this week that said if God brought you to it, he's going to bring you through it. So
that's true, and you're really not given more than you can bear, but it will feel as if you're given 100 times more than you can bear.
Yeah, but I guess the rules are we're not given more than we can bear, right? Or we're supposed to have faith in that anyways, huh? I hope that's true. Oh, goodness.
I have no doubt about it.
All right. Well, I like that. Vote of confidence here. We're going to be right back after this short break with Shaman Avalon Sakti on Brigade Radio. Just a few minutes left. Let me ask you this, though, we're talking about going through it and, things that we are going to have to experience, the certain tests of life and such. And I know you're writing an article on fake shamans and healers. The reason I bring this up is because there is a certain line of thought that thinks, oh, well, you don't have to experience anything negative ever. You know, hey, baby, I'm a shaman. Why don't you take some drugs and lie down and let me worship you like a goddess, and all your problems go away. And those silly people that actually experience pain or suffering on some level or emotions, you know, they're doing it the wrong way because that's the only way to get closer to God, they say. So can you comment on that? And, I mean, is it possible to just not have to go through these things? Is there a way to avoid it, or are we just fooling ourselves?
Pretty much fooling ourselves. Mainly people that say that they are spiritual wimps. I like to call them that. And, you know, the path to bliss goes through the pain first. And anybody who's been on it will tell you that. Because we all have experienced a lot of negative things in our lives, and before you can go to higher states of consciousness, all these experiences that you have so far avoided to fully look at and process will have to be processed or released in some way, and that is going to cause you pain. And also, as the Kundalini rises, you are detaching yourself from the material and getting more spiritual. Doesn't mean you become ungrounded, but you have to let go of certain things that before you thought were absolutely essential to you, and that things that you would never have given up, suddenly you see that they are not right and that you need to give them up, but part of you doesn't want to. So it's a kind of tug of war between the lower energies and the higher energies, and it can be very painful because the ego gets involved.
Okay, so what happens if we continue to avoid the dark night of the soul, or going through or facing ourself, our shadow self, or whatever that ails us? What are the consequences of avoiding it?
I mean, the dark night of the soul, when it comes, it comes. There's nothing you can do. But usually the people who are in denial don't ever even attain a higher state, so they're not going to be tested yet because they're just even not yet there. But if they try,
so maybe they don't even know. So maybe they are speaking their truth when they're saying that because they don't know what it is, because they can't comprehend it.
Well, I have learned, when I learned yoga, I was told this, that material life in the beginning is sweet, but later on it gets very painful and bitter. And spiritual life in the beginning is bitter like hell, but afterwards it is sweet and blissful.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the truth? Okay. So basically, yeah, there's no way you're going to avoid it. So anybody telling you that you can avoid all pain or all experiences of being a human or anything, you know, taking a pill or smoking or drinking something and having sex is going to take it all away and you're going to get closer to God, just kind of run in the other direction, right?
It is, and the best way of doing it is when you're in this pain is to surrender all your pain and your suffering to God and be the observer and the witness, and try not to get emotionally involved and don't play mind games with yourself, such as, say, comparing yourself, thinking you're worse off than others. If you do these things, you're just going to hurt yourself more and you're going to make it much more difficult. Just always keep praying, always keep surrendering. If the surrender is great, then the pain is less. But, you know, at the moment when you're in an issue and you're fighting through some big issue that you're having, if somebody comes and tells you to surrender, you're likely to shout at them.
Yeah, no, very, very good advice, Shakti. I just love the information you have to share with us and, you know, your personal stories and just hearing from so many people that you've been able to help all over the world. It just tickles me to have you here and share your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me, Christie. I'm profoundly grateful.